Hello and good morning everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lee Bennett, one of the product specialists here at Wolters Kluwer UK, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today's webinar. In today's session, I'll be covering an introduction to CCH Trust Accounts, what it can be used for, how it can be used to systemize and provide a consistent output. I'll also show the integration between Trust Accounts and CCH Personal Tax and the Trust Tax return for the completion of the returns. As stated on the previous slide, this webinar will last around an hour and there will be time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to ask any questions using the GoToWebinar meeting panel, but if we do run out of time at the end, I will answer the questions separately afterwards. Also, to make this session as interactive as possible, I'll be asking some questions as we go through via a polling mechanism. So what can you expect over the next hour or so? Well, I've broken down this webinar into bite-sized topics, each one focusing on a different aspect of CCH Trust Accounts. Before I go any further, I'm just going to ask a simple question just so that we can gauge who we have with us today, and also to give you a bit of practice on answering the questions using the poll. So, question number one, I'll just launch it up. How many sets of trust accounts do you currently produce for your clients? So less than 50, 51 to 100, or more than 100, 101. As we go through, I'll be leaving the polls up for about probably 20 seconds or so, just to make sure that everyone has been able to vote. And I'll just share the results as well, just so we can see who we've got. So all of you, wow, all of you produce currently less than 50 sets. Okay. And straight on to question number two. How do you currently produce the accounts? In Word, in Excel, or using an accounting package? You can answer more than one answer in this one as well. Okay, just a few more seconds, I think. I can see that 83% of people have voted so far. Let's see if we can get it to 100. Okay, not quite, 92% of you voted, so we'll close it there. Let's just see the results. So, wow, obviously the majority there using Excel, which isn't too much of a surprise, followed by Word, and only 18% using an existing accounting package. Okay, thank you for answering those. There's only two more questions throughout the rest of the webinar. So, before we go any further, what is CCH Trust Accounts? Well, CCH Trust Accounts is an accounting product for entities holding investments. Now, despite the name of it being called Trust Accounts, it can be used to produce financial statements for the likes of, obviously, trusts, but estates, charities, pension funds. You can even use it to produce limited company accounts and also be tracking the investments for those particular entities. It also supports the investment management requirements of high net worth individuals. So if you just wanted to produce investment ledger reports, investment schedules, but you don't have to necessarily produce the accounts, you can still use the system to be able to do that. And it will push the information into personal tax, the SA 100 in that case, or the SA 900 for the trusts. The principal features are, I guess, fairly obviously, a nominal ledger to produce the accounts and an investment ledger to track the investments. It also obviously then produces things like the financial accounts at the end, and also capital gains tax computations. So, as we've already seen, many firms and the large majority of you guys out there currently producing their trust accounts using either Excel or Word. Obviously, using something like CCH Trust Accounts has some obvious advantages over these methods. So there is, in trust accounts, a database holding all of the data around all of the trusts and the investments and the nominals. It's going to avoid problems associated with spreadsheets, mistyped entries, errors in formulas, transposition errors if you're taking it out into Word, for example. Trust accounts does allow control over certain master data, so the names of the securities, the nominal ledger descriptions. It also supports the use of external data feeds, allowing the generation of investment entries or just checking the quality of broker statements, for example. It automatically produces an investment schedule, which for anyone that does actually produce one of those in Excel, it will avoid the tedious retyping and the checking of the transactions to make sure they're both covered, obviously from an investment schedule point of view, but also that they're recognised in the financial statements point of view as well. And trust accounts, we've intimated this, uses an accounts formatter to automate the production of accounts, enabling the same style to be used year on year for a client or across the whole practice. So if it's things like consistency of output, making sure that everyone gets the same thing, that's obviously going to speed up the accuracy and the efficiency of the generation of the accounts. And once the data is in trust accounts, personal tax is automatically updated, which will obviously save the user from updating personal tax from the broker's packs. So trust accounts does link to CCH personal tax. Some of you may already use that, both, as I said, the individual tax return and also the trust tax return. So you can transfer the capital gains and the investment income. Now, we estimate that this can save you somewhere in the region of up to about 80% of the work involved in preparing the SA 900. Obviously, will depend on the number of investments that your client has and the number of investment transactions that would normally be generated. And during this presentation, I'll be showing you how you can achieve this. So the first area that I'm going to go and have a look at within trust accounts itself is around the different options for processing the trust data, the actual data entry, the transactions, which it kind of, in my view, would either be manually, semi-automated or fully automated. And you can use a combination of all three different areas. And which option you choose may well depend on the spread of investments used by your clients, or the availability of the data in a digital format, or whether you can only get it kind of manual and you're having to retype it into the system. So let's have a first look at trust accounts, which you can see on the screen at the moment. And you'll see that I've got a big list of different clients right in front of us. And each of those clients, although probably in my case, most of them are either trusts or estates, you'll see on the right-hand side of the client list screen, we do have a type column to easily identify, and you can filter on it, different types of clients. So we've got estates, we've got trusts. I do have one individual in there. I think I've got a pension scheme. I'm not sure about a charity, to be honest, but most of them, by the looks of it, are going to be trusts. And the one that I'm going to be using today is the one that I'm highlighted on at the moment, the Lord Trenchmore Trust. And simply by double clicking into the client name will take us into the client menu, and you'll see that this is where we have the nominal ledger and the investment ledger. And this is one of the key things around trust accounts, is the integration between the investments and the nominals. So you're not having to duplicate any transactions from a buying and the selling or the receiving of the income from investments. It will automatically populate the nominal ledger where relevant. So let's skip straight to the data entry options. This is obviously the manual data entry option that I'm going to go for at the moment. And we have further data entry options. The main ones are probably going to be bank payments, bank receipts, journals, and investment entries. So I'll show you a couple of different scenarios that you may have here. And I'm actually going to start off by posting an investment entry. And this is what the investment entry data entry screen looks like. So it's obviously with some fields that need to be filled in. And the first thing that the system asks us for is something called a movement code. Now the movement code, if I just bring a list up on the screen, the movement code basically defines the type of transaction that we're trying to process from an investment point of view. And in very basic, simple terms, it's either going to be a purchase of some kind or an acquisition of some kind. It's going to be a disposal of some kind, or it's going to be income of some kind. And you'll see there's a fairly full list of different movement codes that we have within here. And once we've got the list on the screen, we can either just double pick one, or if you know what the code is, you can just type it directly into the screen. So I'm going to actually choose acquisition in my case. Next thing it asks us for is the date, obviously the date of the transaction. Now, just to point out at the moment, the set of accounts that I'm preparing are for the year ended 5th of the 4th, 2019, and we can see that at the top of the screen there. But Trust Accounts has been specifically built around the ability to process transaction literally on a daily basis. So if a transaction happened today and I wanted to put today's date in, I could do that, and the system will enable me to do that. It obviously won't appear in the accounts for April 2019, but when we do roll forwards, the system will catch up on itself and they will be included in future accounting periods. Now, the date that I'm going to use today, probably in all of the transactions if I'm posting them, is 30th of the 1st, 2019, which happens to be my birthday. Next thing is the reference. Obviously, it could be used for anything, whether it's a broker's reference, whether it's if it's a bank payment, it might be a check number, for example, whatever reference that allows you to identify where it's originated from. I'm not going to bother with that today, and I'm going to go straight to investments. So this is where we pick which investment are we going to be acquiring in this case. So again, I'm just going to, it's actually an F2 keyboard shortcut to take us to this particular client's investment ledger. So these are all the different investments that this particular client currently owns. And you'll see we get a little summary, the investment name, the investment code, the fund. Trust Accounts does allow you to separate the securities into different funds for reporting purposes or for CGT purposes. And there you can see we can have the current holding, the current book cost, and also the value. Now the value is generated using the system. Each of those investments is actually held within a securities database, which I may well show you one of the entries within there just to show you the kind of information that we hold. Now, by default, the system will be trying to produce a valuation as at today's date. Now, I don't have any valuations in at today's date, so I'm just going to choose the year end. And you'll see very nice and quickly and easily, the system then values each of those investments, and the total portfolio holding is valued in somewhere of the region of just over £11 million by the looks of it. Now, I can either choose an existing investment and buy more shares in it, more units in it, for example, or I can go and find this master securities database and pick one from here. So fairly randomly, I'm just going to choose one of my securities within here. And I'm actually going to take you a little bit behind the scenes and show you some of the information that can be held. Now, I'm not going to go through every single screen that you're going to see or every single button. I think there's probably only on this particular security, there's probably only two areas that we're going to be necessarily interested to see how it all works through and gets to the end result, the accounts and the investment schedule. The first one is going to be the history. The history button will contain a history of the events that have happened for this particular security. Now, these can be populated manually. Somebody could go in here and type the date of the event itself, and the details of the event. You'll see in my case they all happen to be dividends, but you might have bonus issues, rights issues, takeovers, mergers, whatever it happens to be. And that can be used across all of your different securities, all your different investments for all of your clients. The system can also be pre-populated with this information using a data feed. I mentioned that earlier. So the data feed will give you a pre-population of different securities, more than I've probably got within my database at the moment. It will run into thousands, but there are different levels that you could subscribe to. So we'll see where they actually come into play a little bit later on. And the next one I'm just going to point out is the prices. This is how the system calculates the valuation. So again, there's nothing particularly stopping anyone from typing the details onto this particular screen. You only really need the date and the reporting price for the system to calculate the valuation for the investments. But again, it is something that the data feed can populate for you on a monthly and an annual basis. But as I said, there's nothing stopping anyone going in here and just typing in a specific date, because that's the date that you want the valuation to be calculated on. So I'm just going to cancel out of some of these. I'm actually going to close out of this. I'm going to choose an existing security. I've already got Hargreaves Lansdown, so let's choose that one. So click select, and you'll see it pre-populates most of the rest of the screen. Actually, it's got the investment code in there now. It pre-populates it with a description. And it has what we call the logged in account and the analysis account. So just to kind of explain these, the logged in account will be where the money in this case is taken out of to pay for the security. If we were doing a disposal, it would be where the proceeds is going to go into. And then the analysis account is what does this represent? In this case, it represents the cost of investments. Now, although we have defaulted that information into the screen, you can always amend it if necessary. If you needed to post it to a different account, or you were using multiple bank accounts, you can just chop and change, you can just swap them out. But in essence, the system is only really expecting me then to say how many extra units are we buying, and you'll see that we've got 350 currently, so I'm just going to have, let's have 1,000, and how much did the trust pay for them, just to make life easier, 5,000. And we just press enter a couple of times on the keyboard. If there are any additional entry details that we need to put in, or we need to see exactly where the postings are, the CGT details or any CGT overrides, those can be entered in, or we can just press OK and move on to the next investment or the next transaction. So I'm just going to do one more at the moment. I'm going to do a disposal. I am going to use the same date, but I am going to use a different investment itself. And let's get rid of some Diageo. So again, the system will tell us the current holding, and it will ask us how much did we sell them for. I'm going to make this one quite big actually. And again, the logged in account, the analysis account are going to be the same, but again, they could be changed. And this time it will pop up with the information, the recorded accounting profit and loss, nearly £94,000, and it's confirming with us the new holding value 500, just so that we can check that off, make sure that we have entered the information correctly. Click close. Again, go on to your next transaction, your next transaction, your next transaction. Anything to do with investments would be done through this investment screen. I'm going to show you, I'll do a bank payment next. And you'll see similar information, obviously more cut down now because we're not referring to anything to do with investments, but I am going to use the same date. I'll just put beneficiary 1. Description, let's do payment to beneficiary 1, and we're going to pay them £5,000. Again, the logged in account is defaulted to 7051. Again, it can be changed to any particular bank account within the nominal ledger. Obviously, in this case, it doesn't know what the analysis account is. It doesn't really know where and what that £5,000 represents in terms of the nominal code. So we do need to enter that in. And again, if we press F2 on the keyboard, this time we're taken to the client chart. And you'll see that it looks like, and it is, an on-screen trial balance. Obviously, the code, the description, the debits, and the credits. So we can again just pick an existing account in the current nominal ledger for this particular client. There is a master chart of accounts that is also available, so those can be brought across into the client chart as well. The reason why we have things at master level and at client level is because you can start to do cross-trust or cross-client reporting. You could produce a nominal ledger or a trial balance for all of your clients, or a range of clients, or specific clients that have something in common. The same goes for the investment ledger as well. So this one, we are going to pick 8136, which is income distribution for beneficiary 1. You'll see that currently we've already paid them £5,000, and we're going to pay them an extra £5,000. So we just close and OK. And you'll see as we're building up the data entry, they get listed on the screen. At any point in time, if necessary, they can be edited. If you notice that you've posted something to the wrong account, or it's the wrong way around in terms of debits and credits, you can simply go and edit it. So that's kind of scenario 1. That's processing option number 1. Everything is entirely manual. The next one that I kind of referred to was, I suppose, what I'd call semi-automated. And this is where we are using the information that's coming from the data feed, or coming from the history button for those securities. Now, I say semi-automated because there are still going to be some manual entries, the additions and the disposals, for example. Obviously, any data feed aren't going to know what they are. It's just mainly going to be the income, but there will be other entries within there as well. And we use a facility here called AutoPost. So if I just go into AutoPost for this particular client, you'll see there's a number of different options as to how you want to process this. Some people will process it on a monthly basis, so they'll change the period start date and the period end date. Some people will do the whole year. Again, it depends on how often, I guess, you're updating and processing the transactions of the trust. I mentioned that the system is multi-fund capable. So we've got 2 funds for this particular client. We've got a main fund and we've got Mary's fund. And then you can choose all of your securities or just some of the securities. So again, different options are available. But we are just going to click on select entries in this case and have a look to see if there's anything for all of the securities within here. Now, what the system will do is go away into each of your investments, go away into each of the securities, and it will identify if there are any transactions, if there are any events under that history tab. And if there are, it will show you the security in this drop-down pick list, and it will then show the details of the transaction down at the bottom of the screen. So we can see for this one, for British Foods, Associated British Foods, we've got a current holding of £2,000, and based on the dividend information, they should have received a dividend of £187, for example. And you'll see over on the right hand side, it's already been ticked to be posted. So at the moment, nothing has hit our client's ledger. We're just reviewing the information that's there. Now, again, there are various default settings that you can choose to say if there is cash that is available, kind of assume that the trust took the cash. If there was a choice between cash or extra stock, again, what would normally be their preference, or you can just literally go through and identify and put the ticks in the boxes as appropriate. Now, this one, for British Land Company, you'll see that we do have stock dividend. The system will know that you can't choose, your client can't choose both options. So it will, while you're ticking one, it will take away the other 2 options in this case. Now, what a few of our existing clients and users prefer to do is actually review the information in a report. So this report at the moment will show everything that is currently ticked. Now, whether you are checking this on screen or whether you physically print this out and check it against bank statements or dividend vouchers, whatever it happens to be, this may be an option for you. Some people do prefer to just view them on the screen. So literally you can just go down each of your securities, make sure there's something in the post box if it needs to be ticked. Obviously, there's nothing stopping you. If you need to go away and check it at a later date, just untick it, run through AutoPost, and then come back and re-go through it again. So if I click on AutoPost, the system will give me a couple of little kind of confirmation messages. It will give me, in this case, it will be the same report, but this is now what has actually been posted. And all the system really does is automate those manual entries that I've already done. So most of these are going to be dividends, but all of them are going to be dividends in this case. But that div, that's a movement code. So there's nothing technically stopping me from posting that manually myself in the same way I did for the acquisition or the disposal. But you'll see how nice and quickly and easily the system will have done all of those transactions in one go. Now, if I just click into select entries again, you'll see that I'm only left now with one security. And this security has what we would call a complex capital transaction. And by their very nature, you can't just simply tick the post column box on the right-hand side. So we have a wizard on the right-hand side that you would need to go through to process the details of, in this case, of the complex capital transaction, which was a bonus issue, but it was issued for a different security. So this particular screen allows you to identify the new security, which is down at the bottom of the screen, and make sure, again, that you're happy with the details that the system is going to take across for you. Now, in this particular instance, there is only one option for the trust that they could have gone through, but there may well be multiple options. You may have I don't know, different securities, different stocks, different levels, different, obviously, options that you could go through. And again, just click post. The system will then post. The system will then post that transaction. Now, eventually, when we click in select entries again, the system will obviously determine there's no investments with valid information to process. So you know that everything within the history for your securities has now been dealt with. Now, as I said, they are just normal transactions. So even after we've gone through the auto post routine, if you find that there are additional securities or the additional transactions that need to be entered or edited, the client's forgotten to tell you that they've sold something, those transactions can be deleted effectively, and you can re-go through auto post where it will identify there is something that needs to be processed. So that's option number 2. As I said, it's kind of semi-automated. There's a little bit of manual for the additions and the disposals, and obviously things like the bank payments or any additional journals that would need to go through. But from an investment income point of view, all of those transactions would be posted in one go. Now, the third option could be totally fully automated, but this does rely on you being able to get the transactions in a digital format, usually a spreadsheet or a CSV file. Now, if I go up to activities this time and go to global operations, and it's what we call transaction import. Now, I'll just point out actually where we are at the moment. We are in the global operations area. So the transaction import, although I'm only going to run it for this particular client, the transactions relate to this particular client, we could have one big spreadsheet covering lots of transactions for lots of different trusts. The system will allow you to import them all in one go for all of the different clients or some of your different clients that you may have. So let's have a look at transaction import. So the first thing we need to do is go and browse and find the CSV file that contains the data. Obviously, it needs to be in the correct format for our system for trust accounts to understand it. But when we click on open, the system will read that CSV file in this case and show us what those transactions are. Now, just obviously for demonstration purposes, I've only got 3 transactions, but that could be 300 transactions, 3,000 transactions, 1 million transactions that could be processed in one go should you wish to do so. And when we first load up the data, we are in, I suppose, what we call review mode. So the system needs to know that the data that's on that spreadsheet is correct data. The data does exist somewhere within the database from a nominal ledger point of view or from a securities investments point of view. So it will ask us first to review the data. And you'll see in my case, I've got one invalid entry. And that means something either is not right within trust accounts, so there's maybe a missing investment that's not part of the securities database, or something is invalid on the original spreadsheet. But what we can do is click on edit to go and identify what that invalid entry is. And you'll see in this case, it is the security code that we've used is not valid. That security code does not exist within the database within Trust Accounts itself. Now, we can either go back to the spreadsheet and put the correct security in, or we can see what that security actually is and make sure that it is in Trust Accounts. And again, if I press shortcut on my keyboard, it is actually that security. So you'll see that with someone or a machine somewhere else, I've just put 41 at the end rather than 40, but I know that it is ruled at Shell B shares. So hit select, click OK. The system will validate the entries. We can take it out of review mode and we can simply post. Now, as I said, that could be 30,000 securities, it could be 1 million securities, but that is literally how easy it is to run through that particular option. So that's kind of data entry done, really. There are really only those 3 options. So if we go back to here and time for my next question, my next poll. So out of the data entry options that I've just demonstrated, which do you think you would use or you could use? And again, you can tick more than one answer in this case. Again, let's see if we can get as many people voting as we can. Actually, looks like a fair split so far. I'll just give it a few extra seconds. Okay, I'll just close the poll, and actually the results aren't that surprising, really. There will be a combination of manual and the data feed. So that, I mean, that takes us up to what, 99%, just both of those. Importing transactions from another system is, I guess I'm going to say, obviously probably the most efficient route to go down. As I said earlier, it does depend on where and how you can get that information from third parties, from brokers. We can help you get it into the format, obviously, that Trust Accounts needs it to be, and that's normally macros in Excel, for example, or copying and pasting. Okay, the next little area is reporting. So obviously the end goal is to produce some financial statements, but Trust Accounts itself does have some very useful investment reports available to you. And if you also need to or do already calculate the CGT on any disposals from your client's investments, it will do this too, as well as calculate any CGT what-if scenario. So probably just have a look at a couple of those reports. I'm not going to go too mad. There are quite a few reports in there, but it's worth probably just highlighting just a few of them in the time that we have. So back to Trust Accounts. And I'm going to go to, where should we go to first? Let's go up to investment ledger and capital gains tax. So I guess fairly obviously, the system will allow you to calculate the CGT. I'm just going to update the dates that I want to cover on my particular report to bring it a bit more up to date. There's essentially 2 different reports that you can run. A capital history report, which is quite a detailed report, and it will show you every event, every capital event that has happened between the start date and the end date. And a computation, which is a much simpler version. Obviously still gives you the same answer. And again, see how quickly that was to actually produce it on the screen. So the system will go through any options that you've got, give you your capital history report, and give you your, in this case, your net gain or loss for this particular client. There's only a couple of different disposals that have happened on there, or a cost reduction on any transfers out, for example. That would have been a complex capital event, most likely. And then the next page is that I suppose, simpler computation, the chargeable assets disposed of, still gives you the same answer, but you don't get the detail of the things that are going on in between the sale and the last chargeable event that we have. So whether you use one or the other as a basis to give some information to your clients, obviously the choice is absolutely yours. And I did mention a little bit earlier on that there is a CGT what if scenario calculation tool. And this will do exactly what it says, really. It will kind of assume that you're wanting to dispose of everything on a given date, first of all. So I'm actually going to put in today's date in here, so 26/09/19. And the system will then give me a list of all the securities that we have on those on today's date. And it will actually go back into that prices table within the securities database to show us the latest valuation or the latest price that we have on record. Now, mine are a little bit out of date, I guess, but what you can do is add in a price. You can go and do a lookup and see what the price is as of today. So rather than having to go necessarily all the way back into the securities database, and I won't do it for all of them, but you can see you can just enter in a user price. Now they are just temporary, so after we click cancel, and if we would come back into this particular screen, they would revert back to the 5th of the 4th, 2018 in my case. And if I just click report, I don't have an exchange rate for one of my prices, but I'm just going to say yes. And the system, as I said, will kind of start off by assuming that you're disposing of everything. So as of right now, if we were to dispose of everything in this particular trust on those particular prices, we would have proceeds of almost £16 million. However, we would get a gain of 15.5 million and losses to offset of just over 82,000. Now you can go through literally the list of securities that you have and change the quantity deemed sold. So actually, we don't want to dispose of 9,800 of them, but what if we only sold 2,000? The system will give you, probably not the best security to start with, the proceeds 20 pence and a loss to offset of £1,000. And you'll see, obviously only very slightly in this case, the system will update the cumulative section in the middle of the screen. Now, some people, and I would probably maybe prefer to do this if I was doing these live, I would then deselect all, and I'd actually start from 0 and then go through and say, well, what if we got rid of just 100, maybe 100 British Land Company shares? This would be the outcome. Obviously, it's going to be the same in this case for both cumulative and this particular holding. But the idea is you can go through and obviously make whatever selections you need to until you're in the position that you want to advise your clients, whatever that position happens to be. Let's do something like that. So that might not be a bad one. £200,000 worth of proceeds. We've got some gains. We'll probably do something to offset those a little bit more. But the idea is you can play around with these figures to your heart's content. When you click print, the system will give you a summary of the things that you've chosen to dispose of, and again then a full capital history report showing each individual calculation with the notional disposal. And probably the other useful report that we have within here is the investment schedule. This would normally be attached to the back of the accounts, but it's actually generated within Trust Accounts itself, using obviously the transactions that we've already been processing. And when you're creating or getting the system to generate your investment schedule, there are a number of different options that you can go through. You'll see, I won't go through all of them, but there's a number of different tick boxes to allow you to change the look and feel of the report. You might want to include page subtitles, for example, if it's looking like it's going to go on to the next page. You can even choose which columns you wish to show on your investment schedule and whether or not you wish to state the values at market value rather than at book cost. And it is literally just a case of putting the ticks in or taking the ticks out. Now you can also create, to save a bit of time, you can create what we call report profiles. This is just a predefined selection of ticks, both under the conditions tab and under the columns tab. So if you are changing how the standard report comes out for some of your clients or a range of your clients, it's probably best to set it up as a report profile so that you're not having to remember which ticks to add in each time. You can select which type of securities you want to include. The investment type would be securities or properties. The system actually does have a properties ledger as well, and other information related to the securities as well. But if we just click report, and we'll see this is a fairly standard investment schedule as it would appear as probably as part of the accounts, as I said. Again, whether you're creating one of these at the moment kind of manually within the system, within something like Excel or even Word, once you've got the transactions in, look how easy and quick it is to get that information back out again. Now there are, and I'm not necessarily going to generate these, but there are printable versions of the trial balance and also the nominal ledger report from the nominal ledger tab. I won't necessarily show you those. They're not as interesting as the investment type reports. So that's a quick whistle stop tour of reporting. And the next thing, I guess, is to have a look at actually how do we prepare the financial statements. So once we've got to the point where we have a trial balance, whether it's a complete trial balance or whether it's still in draft, and obviously we've got some semblance of an investment schedule now generated, we can look to see how we actually turn those into a set of accounts. Now, the accounts are actually produced using CCH Accounts Production, which is part of CCH Central. Some of you may already be familiar with this. I don't know whether any of you already use it, but let's take a look. So back into Trust Accounts, the very top option that we have there is Accounts Formatting. If I just double click, effectively what it's doing is taking across into Central, into Accounts Production, a copy of the TB and a copy of the investment schedule. And you'll see down at the bottom of my screen now, the central icon, that's the central icon for those of you that may not be familiar with it, will start to light up to show you that something has arrived, some data has arrived. You can now click into it. And it will take me directly into Accounts Production for the Lord Trenchmore. And then down the left-hand side, we've got the different options that are available within Trust Accounts. Now, as I said, this is our standard accounts production system that lots of our users will already use to produce things like your sole traders, your limited companies, charities, pensions. But you'll notice, for those of you that maybe do already use accounts production, you may be familiar with it, there's no options on the left-hand side to do data entry because we've already done that within Trust Accounts. All we're doing is taking that data entry and producing a set of accounts. Now, I'm not going to go through, again, every of those options that you can see down the left-hand side. I am basically going to go directly to financial statements because that's where they're generated from. Now, effectively, what we, Wolters Kluwer, provide to you, clients or prospects that are on the line, is a collection or a master pack of pages and notes, if applicable, that make up a set of accounts. And this is what you can see in front of you down the left-hand side. What the system will then go through and do is each of those pages, it will look to see whether actually it needs to be generated for this particular trust. So you'll see the majority of mine do need to be generated, but you will notice that I don't have a tick beside the property income and expenditure page because this particular trust doesn't have any property income. But if it did, then we'd automatically get a tick by the side of that particular page. And that tells us that it is going to be included in the print run when we click on preview, or if we print to PDF and publish it to document management, if you are users of document management. And on the right hand side, you can see a preview, and it is a live preview of a page. Obviously we start with the front cover. If I go down to something like the information page, you'll see that that will generate in real time. Let's make that a bit bigger for you. And this information comes from what we call the statutory database. I kind of call it, that's where the wordy bits go within a set of accounts, which is kind of true. Where the extra disclosure bits would go within any set of accounts. And you'll see that we've got a couple of different paragraphs within here. We've got names of the beneficiaries, etc. We can actually start to interact with the statutory database, with those paragraphs, actually from the preview. You'll see as I move my mouse over the paragraph itself, the cursor changes, and that just tells me that I can click into it. And I can make edits. So actually, if we said, I don't know, it might be 25, for example, click OK, the preview will automatically update. So you know that any edits, or if it's a new paragraph or an additional paragraph, or as I've just done, just replace X's with an actual age, it will appear in real time. You can see exactly the effect that it's going to have. Effectively, there would be nothing stopping me from going into the statutory database and manually going to find that particular paragraph and then editing it in pretty much the same way. But obviously, that saves a lot of time. And the rest of it, let's have a look at some of the pages. Obviously, we have things like a balance sheet. We have capital accounts, not a lot going on there. We have income and expenditure accounts. Again, not too many expenses within here, but looks kind of okay. Beneficiaries income account. Now, for the beneficiaries income account is quite an interesting format, because there are different versions or different layouts that are available depending on how you want to present this information to the trust. You'll see in this case we're identifying separately the different beneficiaries, and the system will be obviously holding the balances, the balance brought forward for each of those beneficiaries, and there's the now £10,000 that I had for beneficiary 1. But this may not be the most appropriate page for this particular trust, and the system will tell you at the bottom of the screen potentially that you may have, in this case, we do have income for the period that hasn't been distributed. So I've not told the system what to do with that £20,000 within there. Now, it could be that actually I don't need to split it within the accounts across those 3 beneficiaries, or I don't need to show it as being split between those different beneficiaries. So actually, I'm going to add a format. And that format is going to be an alternative format. And I'll do, which one? Probably this one, I think. If I OK that, that's going to insert it next to the existing one, and you'll see that that's been given a tick as well. What I would do is need to choose which of those income accounts I wanted to include within my accounts, and then simply remove the other one. If we don't remove the other one, or we don't untick it, then the contents page potentially won't kind of make sense. The page numbers will be out after that point. We don't have an accumulated income account. We do have an investment schedule, which will be based on the layout that we saw within trust accounts, but obviously it's now in the same look and feel of the rest of the accounts. So once we've had a quick look through the accounts, we're kind of happy with those. Again, they may still be fairly draft, they may be final. We can click on preview. And at this point, this is where the system will identify and calculate things like page numbers, or if we've got any notes to the accounts, it will cross-reference all of the accounts in there as well. So there's my contents page, now numbered. There's, again, the summary of the trust, trustees approval, balance sheet, etc., etc. If you want to have a sample of these accounts and the other accounts that I mentioned earlier, the estate accounts or charities, pensions, we can make those available to you guys, probably with the recording tomorrow. So that's the accounts, and that really is once you've got the kind of your look and feel set up, and you can change the look and feel. There is a full editor within the financial statements. If you wanted to change it just for that particular trust, or hopefully across the rest of your trust to keep that consistency of output, you can. Once you've done it, the system will just go away and generate. So probably, how are we doing for time? Probably the last kind of section to mainly have a look at within the software is how does that then get imported into personal tax? And when I say personal tax, I also include trust tax in there. So not really much more to say about that. Let's go and have a look. So if I go to home within here and then click on open, that's going to open the client record within Central. And again, it's within Central that we're going to be producing the actual tax return. You'll see here I got a tax links. Where we've just been is under accounts production. Now, actually, before I get into the actual tax return itself, I am just going to go to the tax links tab and just talk about what we can see under here. So this is where we basically link the client within trust accounts and the client within personal tax and tell the system how automated we want the link to flow. And you'll see it is just a tick in the box. And probably I will, I'll leave it unticked just for the moment, and I'll kind of explain the difference. So if I just go to my tax returns tab and go into 2019. Now, if I had ticked the box to have the link run automatically, literally as soon as I go into the tax return, the system will go away into trust accounts and fetch any of the information, any of the income, any of the CGT information that we've been processing within trust accounts. In this case, because I've left it unticked, you'll see down near the bottom of the screen, we get this little lovely pink ribbon. The linked portfolio transaction data is not up to date. Click here to update. So we leave it up to the user to determine how automated they want the link to run. It could be that they want to do everything else with the tax return at this point in time and leave this till the end, or they might want it done literally every single time something changes within trust accounts. But if I give that a click, you'll see, if I scroll down a little bit by the looks of it, the rest of the information has come in where relevant. And if we go into something like income from UK securities, you'll see that those are all the different securities that we have processed in trust accounts. We can see that it's been imported. Down at the bottom of the screen, it will then give us the details of the actual transaction, of the actual dividend. So it does replicate exactly what trust accounts has done. And again, I guess fairly obviously, hopefully by now, if you're having to do this already within either our trust tax system or another trust tax return system, you'll see how quickly that is. You're already processing the data somewhere else. Why not bring it into the tax return? The link doesn't really stop there. So if you're also doing the individual beneficiaries trust individual returns, you can take the information. The system will create the R185 records, and if I just go and find the client within here, so Lucy I think was one of them, and go into tax returns 2019, I'll get a very similar message. Obviously, in this case, the linked R185 data is not up to date. Click here to update, and it will bring across any information that is relevant from the trust return into the this individual's personal return. I'm probably not going to show you any more around the generation of the trust tax return. But obviously it will generate the rest of the trust tax return and all of the other sources or reliefs that may be appropriate for your clients. So other features in CCH Trust Accounts, well, in the hour that we've had or got, We've only got a few minutes left. We've really only scratched the surface of what CCH Trust Accounts is capable of, as well as other cross-client reports. You can also perform things like bank reconciliations. It also has a multi-currency module, allowing you to use bank accounts held in other currencies, which can be used to obviously buy and sell securities, and it does use foreign exchange rate facilities. There's also transaction reporting module, which can be used for more in-depth analysis or data mining across your client or across your client's securities, which can then be used to generate other management style reports. And I've just got one example here actually. Asset allocation, the main asset classes are as follows. So how do they hold the assets within the trust? The equities by geographical region, we've only got two there, UK or in the Eurozone. Equities by sector, and obviously the largest 10 equity holdings by market value, for example. And that's all the information that's currently already within the database. Either it's manually entered under the history tab, or it's given to you via the data feed. So not a lot of additional work that you actually need to do to get this style of reports above and beyond actually producing the financial statements. So before we close off, I do have just one final question just to ask you, and then any questions that you may have raised. If you do have any questions, feel free to start typing away into the Q&A section. But if we just launch this last poll, and I think you can only give one answer for this one, but which of the features of trust accounts I have shown today would give you the biggest advantage, do you think, over your current process? So whether it's just simply the securities database, having the history, having the valuations within there, whether, as I said, they're manually entered or whether it's via a data feed, the auto post, so taking the history and generating the transactions, the transaction import itself, obviously producing the accounts in a nicely formatted, consistent output, which I said can be edited to meet your house style, or the completion of the tax return. Obviously, I went through that bit quite quickly, but the transactions, they all appeared exactly where they are in where they need to be within that transaction, within the tax return. So let's see how the votes are going. We've got just 62% of people voting at the moment. Let's see if we can get that up a little bit. I'll just give maybe 10 seconds or so. Okay, we're up to 69% of people have voted, so let's close it there and share the results. So producing the accounts, I guess, is a fairly obvious one. Transaction import, and then fairly split between the use of the securities database and the auto post. Again, quite interesting. And I guess it probably would have been helpful to have it as a multi-answer question. No one voted for completion of the tax return, which I guess, given that you could only have one answer, is not that much of a surprise. Okay. So, any questions? Over to you guys now. So let's have a quick look. What's this question? So, how is it licensed? That question always comes up. How is Trust Accounts licensed? It is licensed on a concurrent user basis. So, however many people do you need to be accessing Trust Accounts at any one point in time? There are some modules within Trust Accounts as well. They can be individually licensed. I mentioned things like multi-currency previously. That would be an additional license because not every one of obviously our clients would need that. So why pay for it? So that might be an option. I think that's basically it. So we've got the user account plus some additional modules within there. And then the only other question that I've had is, does it come with a data feed? No, it doesn't. Again, not all of our clients may have the spread of investments to warrant the use or the cost of a data feed. It is provided by a third party, so we don't supply it. We just provide the link to obviously read the data into our system for you to then use it. So that would be an additional, let's call it an additional investment that you may need to make. Okay, I can't see any other questions popping up, so we are bang on 12 o'clock. So let me just say thank you very much for joining us. If you do have any further questions, feel free to contact us, and we'll do our best. Well, we will get back to you separately. Okay, thanks for joining me. Thank you. Bye-bye.